Okay, welcome back. This is The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I am Stu. And today we are discussing Don't Look Up, the 2021 Adam McKay quote-unquote satire about a meteor's imminent arrival, or a comet, arriving and destroying the Earth, and the attempts of various characters to either deflect the comet or to profit off the comet, and we'll have some things to say about that shortly. But beforehand, we wanted to talk today about a different kind of world ending, and a more localized, more specific world that is coming to an end after a pretty good run, approaching 1,000 years of dominance, at least in the country of our friends across the water, the United Kingdom.
Special relationship.
The United Kingdom's royal family. Michael, you've gone on a bit of a deep dive on what's been happening with the latest controversy surrounding the royals. So bring me up to speed.
It's the only time I ever get involved, and it's funny because I actually saw someone tweeting about this where they raised an interesting point where, like, what I think the Brits really fail to realize is that America sort of takes in the royal family only as a reality television show, right? That, like, any of the greater consequence, the questions of monarchy and its value, have nothing to do with the way that we consume it. And so, like, the only time they can actually break through is with death, infidelity, or its amazing ability to, like, create almost by itself a field of conspiracy theory
and drama of
unparalleled
proportion.
Right. And so, like, obviously everyone knows the basics, I'm sure, by now, but this obviously heavily edited photo of Kate Middleton and the kids appears, presumably taken by William himself.
Well, I guess allegedly taken by William.
Yes, allegedly taken by William, who had, I guess, become the good husband for a day to get this photo out.
For 5 seconds.
Yes. And of course, it's quite clear that the photo is at the very least edited, but almost certainly, like, it didn't happen.
It's almost,
right?
It seems like it's composited from, like, a variety of, like,
I've seen her face is from a Vogue magazine cover.
I've seen the various overlays of that.
Right. And so, like, it's, you see this, when there's these events or this, like, meme cycle that completely takes over the feed, right? It's just inescapable. And so, like, from this, pretty basic, let's say, best case scenario, pretty basic PR fuck up, right?
Yeah.
The most basic idea is that they're scrambling to, explain her whereabouts because she got this abdominal surgery. And they did announce that she would be taking months off from public appearances, which on the face of it is obviously a little strange.
Well, we don't know what kind of surgery. Abdominal surgery, that could be anything, right?
Did
she have appendicitis? Did she have her intestines removed? Does she have,
there's this leaning on, the people who defend this action kind of lean on, they basically make everyone else to blame. It's the way that we consume it that is responsible.
It's none of our business. Really?
Well, it's not just that it's none of our business. Like, we expect Kate to look a certain way, and if she doesn't, then, like, it's actually our fault. Like, we're not going to see pictures of a sickly Kate because she's Princess Kate.
This is the same deflection we've talked about in the last couple episodes, right?
Right.
It's not the powerful and rich who are to blame. No. It is us who are the individuals.
Right. It's our expectations.
We drive them to these lengths.
And whenever I think of Princess Kate Middleton, I demand a certain standard of, ease of looking at her. I don't want to be made uncomfortable by what Kate Middleton looked like. So I am to blame, I suppose.
Well, yeah.
But what ends up happening, as so often is the case with these things, is that then a bunch of other explanations some completely incredible to like some that are sort of like this more basic connect the dots starts to take place, you know.
Uh-huh.
So you've got, you know, William's infidelity, and apparent
With the
long-term mistress.
Marchioness of
Yes,
Chumley. No,
Chamondale.
I've heard it's pronounced Chumley. Uh,
Okay,
it's
right.
one of
Well,
those classic
right.
spelled one
And
way,
from
pronounced
then,
another. Yeah.
from that launching point, you then get into a whole series of things, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
to say quite quickly is that Charles's illness, cancer, that he's appears to be treating with tinctures and potions, that his imminent death or the fact that it's the potentiality of it has accelerated has, you know, made William really look at his life and decide that he wants this other woman to be the Queen of England, and needs to make this swap,
Needs to make it
you know,
happen
post haste.
pronto.
Right, right.
Because
Um,
it's presumably much more awkward to divorce the queen or whatever, like
I
than the
guess. I
princess.
guess.
Like,
I mean, this feels about as
they're
awkward
gonna
as it
start
can
printing
get.
out the money with her on it and stuff, right? Like,
Right,
I mean,
right.
yeah.
I mean, you have to really, if this is the case, like you have to really want to be married to this person and divorce this other person, right? Because they obviously facilitate a whole second or third or fourth lives for all of these people,
Well, right. I
you
mean,
know?
even when Charles was married to Diana, he was still carrying on with Camilla behind,
Yeah, I mean that's
right?
like the
And
great Diana quote, right? Like the marriage was crowded, there was three of us in it,
yeah,
right?
ooh,
And it, you know, this
burn.
this sort of like open secret that some sort of behavior like this from the royals is to be expected, right? But then there's the it goes obviously as far as you want it to, but there's Tom Kingston who you know,
Used
committed
to
suicide.
date Pippa Middleton. I read.
Yes, yes. And so like the craziest, most coherent one sort of goes something like there were these bruises on William's neck, and the theory then emerges that Kate learns that Rose is going to keep a baby fathered by William. And she then announces that she actually is pregnant with child with
From this
Tom.
guy Tom.
Yes. And they that perhaps there's a forced abortion or perhaps there's a pregnancy being carried to term by Kate out of the public eye.
Secret, yeah, and that
Yes.
perhaps William murdered the other man, right?
Right. And so
And
like,
that's
you
where
know,
the
I mean,
bruises on the neck come from.
right. And so like when we're talking about
This is all
this
hypothetical. We don't.
yes, obviously. And so like when we're talking about all of this on this particular podcast, I think it's like what's fundamental is that it's the photo, right? Is this is yet another moment of this like seeming snap break from reality that we get presented with fairly often now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But this is like such an extreme version with so much attention on
Well,
it.
and it's like
Um,
any photos of her that emerge forever after this are going to be
oh yeah,
people are going to be
right,
dropping
right.
in the
And,
Vogue
and
covers.
you see like what's very strange about it is like on the one hand you get all this coverage of like the fear of AI, right, and the impossibility of like
the
determining real
deep
from
fake
deep
political
fakes. And it's like
actors.
one would assume that the royal family would have access to the state of the art deep fake to pull off, you know, seemingly
I mean,
a photo.
would one assume that though? When I think of the royal family, I don't imagine like a bunch of tech bros who are like completely on top of all.
Do you think that this much time could have gone on in this new sort of like social media environment with everything that they've dealt with like Harry
Well,
and Meghan?
my understanding is that they're in this symbiotic relationship with the media, right? Where essentially the media needs them because they sell papers and they, you know, sort of can broker access to them
Right.
in order to have the media. Right. I mean, this is how.
Right. Which is why one of the reasons this story blew up is it was actually places like Reuters and the AP
It was
that
like.
called out the photo.
Right.
And we're like, we can't run this. It's not real. And it's still up on their shared Instagram.
Really strange.
And there's a statement by Instagram on it that says
This photo is fake.
In effect, this is a fake photo.
Which is hilarious
right?
when you think of all
Yeah.
the edited and maniacal stuff you see on Instagram. At least
Right. But this is like why the royal family has such a unique place in this sort of like confusion between the real and the fake is that there's this sense I think that people have that like kind of anything is possible with them, which is,
Yeah.
grounded in a long, as you alluded to, history. Um,
I mean, I wrote
you
about
know,
this in my new book, actually. Subtle plug for my new book, Berlin Fancy Term, which is out at the end of April. I'll put a link in the description. Yeah, I talked about Princess Diana. That was, I don't know. Princess Diana's death is a weird one for me because I went away from home to boarding school the day after she died. So it's like this.
Interesting, because I flew out of Heathrow the day she died.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, I've never told you the story. I was getting
No.
this really early morning flight.
And were there just like
1997, so I was
Yeah,
14 years old.
Okay.
And my dad comes in to wake me up at like 4 in the morning or whatever to get me going to the airport. And he charges into the room and he goes, Princess Diana has died. And I was like,
That's
"Why
funny
would
because
I-"
my mom charged into my room at midnight or whatever time it was in the U.S. to be like,
Yeah.
Diana,
And so
Diana
I was
didn't make
flying
it.
back.
Yeah.
We were moving back as a family, but I was flying early to start school. And I was flying by myself, and I was just in an airport with grown adults
Just
huddled
crying.
around just bawling
Yeah,
their eyes
yeah.
out, you know? And I think that like that's like it's that sort of level of devotion that kind of like makes Americans head spin, right?
Well, I mean, like, are you familiar with the like Princess Diana was murdered by the landmine
Yeah,
lobby
sure,
stuff? I
sure.
mean, just like what? Like I've expressed some of my frustration, shall we say, with certain other conspiracies. But at least it's like the CIA killed JFK. It's like, oh, okay, like that's
Sure.
it's on the table, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the landmine lobby killed her by like sending like her car into a like it does
Right. But
it doesn't make any sense. Come on.
with the Kate one, it's like I think that there's probably I mean, again, there's so many different things that it could be, and obviously it's fun to speculate
Sure.
about what might be taking place. But there's so much like genuine palace intrigue, right? You have to remember that like each major member of this family has a whole team unto themselves.
Oh
that
yeah.
manages the press and the publicity and the lives of these individual people, and they probably have spies in each of the
Their
camps and all of this
rivalries,
stuff. Right.
It's a
Right.
court.
And like to me, what the most fascinating idea, which I think kind of falls short of some of the more salacious things, is the possibility that Kate, in fact, did do this and actually wanted the photo to be picked apart for whatever the truth is.
Oh,
that
so
Kate
this
is
is
upset
so
about.
this was just like a false flag.
Yeah, to get everyone trying to figure out what's going on, because there's obviously been this wall of secrecy around Middleton,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And although people were like, where the fuck is she? It's been like that for a while now.
Sure.
Now you're getting to, if you're faking photos, we now demand information as to where this
Oh, is
person
it? So this is like this is like a cry
Perhaps.
for help.
That's what I'm going. That's what I'm going.
Oh, I
with.
like it. Well, one of
I think it's like William-based anger,
yeah.
right?
Well, he
And
seems
of course, like it could be the like simplest and shittiest explanation
yeah,
that she's
unwell,
gravely
after,
ill.
Yeah.
The people in the family don't give a flying fuck about her anymore.
Or
Meanwhile, the
if they ever
king
have,
is dying. Right.
So
and
so William's gonna be king soon.
right. And so she's like,
And she's
just
like, this is the
snapped,
worst case
you know?
scenario. What have I?
right.
She's having the
Right.
realization that most people who marry into the royal family seem to have
Yeah.
sooner or later.
Right. But it's like, the reason I just find myself down the rabbit hole of it is it's just like you get these moments every now and then where the like complete inability to get information like leads to this whole blending of reality and fantasy.
Well, and it is
that
funny.
truly amazing to witness.
It is funny that there's just this like utterly archaic institution that's still around that has no
Yeah.
pragmatic power at all. Right? I mean, it's in fact illegal for them to like get involved in politics.
Right.
And
Well,
also
and there's like
just
there's
the gatekeepers. I mean, the people who are like, I bet you couldn't even. I saw one tweet that was like, I bet you couldn't even tell me like what cottage Kate and William live in Windsor
yeah,
2 weeks
yeah.
ago. And if you can't,
And
then
and
butt
like the
out. This
weird
is none of your
defenders,
business.
like
This is none of your
guys like
business.
guys like Piers Morgan who just choose they like hate Harry and Meghan, you know?
Right, but they're
And they
like,
just like defend William's behavior, clearly off rocker, right?
yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how
But yeah, I mean, I think the last thing to
it's
say
like
about it
a
is it
team
kind of like
sport.
all of these moments, they always like foreshadow, you know, you always think like, what is this like in 10, 15 years, right? Like as we actually get into sophisticated and widespread use of AI and image and audio and video
It's
manipulation,
not good,
right?
right?
It's really not good. I mean, if she had gotten sick 10 years later, there's every chance that this could have been dealt with in a completely fabricated and very smooth manner, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, this does sort of tie into the movie we're talking about for today, in as much as I think one of the themes of the movie is like a form of media criticism, right?
It thinks it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I said it's a theme.
Yeah.
I don't know how effectively executed the theme is, per se. So, don't look up. We're talking about this movie because it's about the apocalypse very literally,
Mhm.
and it is terrible. I hate this movie. Sorry to start on a down note, but this is one of the most. I mean, I like Waterworld was rough. The Postman, a heinously bad movie to use one of your favorite words. This,
But they seem like lost in the making of those movies.
right? I
They
mean,
just seem like
they're
they're
bad.
genuinely
There's
don't
like
know how to
something
get
about
out of it.
the conception itself that is just
Yeah.
terrible. This is all right. Well, Adam McKay. Do you have any experience with his other movies? I'm not the biggest McKay head.
Well, The Big Short, Vice, right?
Sure, The Big Short. I have seen that one. I've never seen Vice. Believe it or not, someone has.
It's the same. It's all the same sort of like tongue-in-cheek, half critique
And this sort of like
stuff.
meme. There's like a with the little captions that appear on screen at various
Yeah.
times. That it's not my favorite vibe. I guess he got to start working with Will Ferrell as a director at least. I think he wrote some movies in the
Okay.
'90s maybe. Anchorman was his kind of big comedic breakthrough. A movie that I've never had a lot of love for.
Me neither, although it is adored.
Yeah, people love it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredibly successful. I guess he did Step Brothers also.
That's a pretty funny movie.
Never seen it.
Step Brothers is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean,
But again, it's just a movie about, O'Reilly,
well,
C. Riley and Will Ferrell being stepbrothers. It's not like an attempt to influence the climate
right. It seems
crisis
like
conversation.
around 2012, he kind of pivoted more towards these
Yeah.
thought provoking. There's a movie from then called The Campaign, which I
Never saw it.
also haven't seen. Yeah, we really did our homework on this one. Um, and then
I mean, after watching this, I wasn't like, I should probably go through his whole catalog.
yeah, I was very much not doing that. I did see The Big Short. I liked it fine. I mean, I thought it was interesting to have a little fictionalized window into the world of
Sure.
the housing crisis or whatever, and like how that was even possible.
Yeah.
I think it's for the most part at least somewhat accurate, but as with all these things, they all take their
And
liberties.
watchable. This movie was not watchable. It was like
Yeah,
hard
like
to watch
exactly.
the
I
movie.
actually watched The Big Short for the first time not that long ago, maybe in the
Oh, really?
last couple of years. I thought, oh yeah, I should probably see that. And yeah, just like a Sunday afternoon kind of not football
I always feel
season.
like, for some reason, I always equate The Big Short to like Moneyball. Maybe
Yeah.
because it's like what's the guy who wrote it, right? Michael Lewis. Didn't he do both?
Oh, did he? Yeah, yeah. Michael Lewis, who was best friends with Sam Bankman-Fried, and then
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and then wrote the book on him that turned out to be like I don't know if he was writing a book on him, and then all
Yes.
like his life collapsed, and like
Sure.
he's going. But there were some funny documents about that leaked this past week where Bankman Fried was like, blame the collapse of FTX on the woke media or something, and then he was like, go on CNBC with Michael Lewis to like cover my, it was just like it was
Yeah.
like it was from his like notes app where he was just strategizing like how to go on Tucker Carlson, blame it
Which is
on
kind of interesting and loosely related to this, how much of this is how much of this movie has like strategizing media
Right. That it's
approaches,
like this the message of this movie is that like the people in power are like unbelievably cynical.
Right. But
Right.
let's just start briefly with like what's interesting about McKay, right?
Yeah.
And is David Sirota
David
who wrote
Sirota
it?
co-wrote it with McKay, and both of them are, despite the sort of status of this movie this movie feels very lib-pilled, right? Just sort
Yeah.
of like centrist Dem, like they're both Bernie guys. They both backed Bernie in 16 and 2020. Sirota was involved with the campaign. And I think Sirota's pretty smart. I see him
Yep.
posting on Twitter, now X.com, pretty cogent critiques of like mainline Dem thinking, a sort of antidote to some of the blue-pilled madness that we find ourselves, the sort of Aaron Rupars of the world.
Right.
These guys who just the Dems can do no wrong.
Or like Brooklyn Dad Defiant.
Yeah, another one. Like, exactly. And like, God bless.
He's better than Brooklyn Dad Defiant. We can say that confidently.
He is. I mean, like, God bless those guys. I know they're just hacks who are doing a job.
Yeah.
No hate, but hate. I mean, come on, like, get out of here. I talk about this with my students sometimes. It's like, given the sort of liberal college professor stereotype, I'm like, look, guys, like, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I'm not telling you,
Yeah.
it's out of my purview. That's up to you. All I'm saying is, like, just be skeptical of all of these people, for goodness sake, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat.
Well, I think that's like one of the problems with this script is that it tries to be a bunch of different things and ends up being sort of none of them. So like on the one hand, it is a disaster movie. On the other hand, I think that they think they want to make a movie that is sort of allegorical to the climate crisis. And then on top of that, what they seems to really interest them is what is an incredibly simple and boring and self-satisfied media critique.
Yeah,
right?
a very
and so
trite
it ends up
media
being, it comes across as primarily the media critique, right?
Right.
And so,
and you know what did this much better, like almost 50 years ago, is Network, right? I mean,
yes, right. And to the point where you even have like DiCaprio's like absolutely worst moments in this movie are when he tries to like have his network moment.
His
By the way, in multiple scenes.
Howard Beale. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
He doesn't even have like a crescendo or a peak, right? He's like doing this for a bit. He's on a kid show yelling and freaking out. And like
he's beating up Elmo in order to
it just doesn't hit.
We're all gonna die, Elmo. It's like,
but like
great.
Leaving aside the like content of the critique for now, it's so hard to watch because it's like, how so many movies now, they're trying to blend texting and the internet and social media onto the fucking screen, right? To code the fact like that is how people communicate now. So like when characters are like gonna meet up or they're sharing secrets, they now like you'll see a fucking text bubble appear. It's so aggravating to watch, and the only time it ever works, I think, is when it's very limited in its scope.
I agree.
And this like goes to that well so often with like the montages of the tweets and the little videos and the memes, and it's just like your head is fucking. It's like the things that we hate about being online, you've put on there without any worthwhile criticism of it. So we're just watching like how shitty it is to be.
It just
online
feels
in
really
movie form.
It feels really stale too. Like it's not, and there's like nothing smart mixed in with all of
no,
the
like of course, like
idiocy.
she like her like Jennifer Lawrence's character Kate Dibiasky, right, so she discovers the problem. She's a PhD candidate.
Yeah, we should do a brief plot summary, I guess.
Why don't you just break down how it begins?
Right. So Kate Dibiasky is Jennifer Lawrence is a PhD candidate in astronomy working at Michigan State with Professor Mindy, played by Leo DiCaprio. They discover a comet, an Oort cloud object. I won't ask you if you are familiar with the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is basically, so there's this thing called the Kuiper belt, which is where it's like Pluto's kind of at the start of the Kuiper belt, where there are a lot of Pluto-like objects. And then way further out in our edges of our solar system, there are these things that are called Oort cloud objects, and some of them are comets
Okay.
that will periodically circle back into the main sort of planetary zone of the solar system. I just like saying Oort cloud. It's a good word. I'm like, oh, finally, all those astronomy videos I watched in 2012 they have a use. They discover a comet, and it's very exciting because this is, it gets named after her, right? It's the comet DiBiase. But very quickly, Professor Mindy Leo does a couple of calculations, and he's like, everyone get out of here. And they realize that based on the trajectory of it's going to hit the Earth, right?
Right.
In about 6 months. And this is a big comet. It's not like this isn't a comet that's big enough. They call it a planet killer, right? So they think, well, what do we do? We've got to go to the government. We've got to warn the president, essentially.
Yep.
And then the next section of the film is them attempting to do that. And they are faced with bureaucracy. There's this military guy they meet. They meet this. They're not trusted at first because they're not Ivy League professors. It's just like,
No, they're merely at Michigan State.
yeah.
So that becomes the first stumbling block.
And then so they got to check with some people at Harvard and Stanford just to correct.
And I guess they're also so like focused on science, as it were, as they refer to often in the movie, like science.
Right. They're not. They have no media training. Right.
They like, for some reason, I guess, like, are shocked that these people who are in charge, who in a public facing way must be like transparently idiotic in their term, the president, for example, Meryl Streep, but they're still stunned that they're not like ready to solve this right away.
Which feels, again, it's one of many weaknesses of the film, right? That
they're totally unprepared to deal with like an obstinate White House, even though
it's like they're
been existing in this country.
Well, and they're in academia
with these people in charge,
as if academia is not just rife with like this kind of bureaucratic like the president of Michigan State that or the dean or the department. It's like.
Yeah,
it has this idealistic picture of science as something that goes on in an environment of pure learning and pure like
and like just once you present the facts, again, it sort of goes back to like the Al Gore of it all,
right?
Like if you just give them the facts, like no matter who they are, the government will digest them in the right way
and they'll act. Yeah,
right.
It's very naive about academia in that respect because academia is like as messed up as politics.
Well, you would think, and coming from Michigan State, they would have some like history. The Larry Nassar thing is going on, right? While these people are probably at Michigan State, so they're probably used to having the leadership not exactly present the truth behind a truly terrible situation.
That's a good point. In any case, they eventually realized that Jonah Hill, who's the president's chief of staff / son. And who is the worst part? I mean, I'm not just
unbearable to witness.
I'm not a big Jonah Hill fan to begin with, but in this movie, he's just so loathsome. There's something so odious about his performance. It just really didn't work for me.
Yeah, it came across like profoundly unfunny.
Yeah. Well, the whole film, I think, suffers from that problem. But he is the epicenter of that.
Right. He's like supposed to be the comic.
Hey, remember him? Like, hey, stoner comedy guy. Where's James Franco? Yikes! James Franco is in prison, unfortunately.
Sure.
Not literally, but meme prison. So they decide to go to the media, right? In lieu of
gotta leak it.
And it turns out DiBiase's boyfriend is conveniently a reporter. Right?
The idea that like they have in their possession the biggest, most important story of all time, but they're like, well, I do know this one guy, like as though they couldn't bring this to any number of people. It's like,
right?
My boyfriend knows someone at the Herald.
Oh, right.
Might be able to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. So this begins the segment of the film that's very much focused on the media. They go on various TV shows. And the sort of recurring one is this sort of upbeat morning show type. I don't even know because I don't watch cable anymore.
It's like a Good Morning America type thing, but even like
with
Tyler Perry, right?
Right, and is that Kate Blanchett is the other host?
Is that it?
I
Wow,
think
they really got a
s-
cast in this thing.
it's loaded, and the female host, immediately takes a real liking to Leo, Dr.
Oh
Mindy,
yeah.
and
Like to the
his
point where you're like, does this character somehow remember like DiCaprio in Titanic? You know, like because he
like
doesn't look like a heartthrob at this point.
what is actually happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ariana Grande is in it as herself, but not like.
Right. Right.
And as they're trying to tell the world about this apocalypse, the world is in fact much more interested in Ariana Grande's DJ Cello as her boyfriend, and they're broken.
Hmm.
It's like it's sort of reality TV. Feels very
Well,
staged.
this is part of where it gets all muddied, right? Is that there's also the president who, I think you said when we were watching it, is like Hillary Trump, basically,
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
Meryl Streep character,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so she can't take it seriously because, of course, the midterms are coming up. So
And
we just go through the same,
Her Supreme
and
Court
the Supreme Court nominee is getting found out for it being a nude model
in
in college.
college. It's like okay,
And so, like, you have this media story, and then, I think they're trying to show that, like, the fog of war of the media, the
they're not
junk
able
is
to
so severe.
differentiate like something that
Right,
will end the world from like
right.
the problem of the midterm elections.
Yep. And like you sort of think that if you're gonna do a critique like this, it would have been better if it wasn't actually a fully apocalyptic scenario because it's just so ridiculous to watch this sort of obfuscation for 2 hours
It's
going on.
2 hours and 20 minutes. Like
Right.
Doctor Strangelove, tight 90. This
Yep.
is so much worse and so much longer. It really just like I think I had to break it up. I think I had to watch it over a couple sessions. I could not actually handle. So I'd seen it once before when it first came out with my parents when I was home for Christmas in 20.
Sure, I think everybody experienced that.
And my parents thought, oh, it's so smart.
Oh, it's so smart. You know what it is? It was just really smart. It was just really smart. It really makes you think about the exact way I think about the world.
All
It's
right.
interesting like
So
that.
eventually they set up a mission to stop it. The guy who's running the mission is racist for some reason.
Hmm.
And then it's aborted at the last second because a tech mogul, a sort of Elon Zuckerberg figure,
Yeah.
who's terrible. It's also just like
Very weird character choice, like his strange voice and his mannerisms.
it's just not a direct parody of anyone real, and
Yeah.
also just not real feeling at all. Like
Yeah.
felt like a stock character pulled from a
Right.
drawer, and is horrifically unfunny.
Right, but he's discovered that this comet or meteor contains
Comet,
all
rare
these rare
earth,
minerals
yeah.
that would totally save the world, as in like the world of capital, right? That like the ability to like keep making phones would continue,
Right,
and so
but well,
that
because if
then
we get
becomes
it in
more
in
important.
you don't have to rely on China's like lithium mines or whatever. You know, it's
Sure.
but it's
And of
like
course, that's like there's also no involvement with any other this whole
wait,
for us.
no
It's all
involvement.
just no involvement with any other country, really, to speak of in this whole movie. It just goes through the American political process, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing is like, what's wrong with the logic of this guy in like getting all these like, what happens when suddenly there's like 100,000 times as much gold as there used to be?
Right.
It's
Right.
gold is no longer valuable, right? I mean, it doesn't. There's
Well, they sort of explain it with him, his motivation, right? When he like loses it on Dr. Mindy, where he's like, "You think I'm a mere businessman? I'm doing this for the evolution of the human species." So like in theory, it's supposed to be like, yeah, if there was no more like supply issue and all of a sudden all Bash phones, which was the name of
the company is
the tech
called
company for some reason,
Bash. Great,
Bash, that their
brilliant.
phones would cost mere pennies, that he's fine with that because he's actually on some
A
greater
great
mission.
humanist.
Yes.
Reminds me of a certain billionaire who makes that claim about himself quite frequently,
Right.
while also posting concerning a lot. But anyway, um, it's so dumb. So they call off the mission to blow up the comet, start a new mission that has these drones. Gradually,
It is going to break up the comet, correct?
yeah, and like into manageable pieces, and then
Yeah.
they'll pick them up in the ocean. Meanwhile, Dr. Mindy is having an affair with the newscaster lady. He's
Pointless as well. Don't
left
see what's
his
going on here.
wife, who is the Melanie Linsky, the fascist mom from Last of Us. She's great. I like her and everything.
She is, yeah. She's a great actress.
But he's left her for this hot,
The
blonde.
idea, I guess, is that he gets a cup of coffee in like the world of fame and media.
Yeah,
Is that right?
and he's intoxicated by it. He's found out,
Yes.
and they're also there's this motif of them getting black bagged, where like Men in Black, CIA come and put black bags over their heads and take them away, which is not funny and is also just like disturbing and stupid. I don't know.
Right. And the Jennifer Lawrence character just kind of drops off, right?
Well, she just goes
Doesn't-
home and is like working at a Walmart or whatever, or like
Yeah.
a
Still, like-
liquor store where she gets to meet.
Having like a profound like nervous breakdown rightfully, but like then taking a job as in retail.
Yeah,
Like,
which I guess
none of
her
it really-
parents are forced her to do because they don't want to deal with her politics because they say they're for the
Right.
jobs the comet will bring.
And then she has like a love story with Timothy Chalamet.
For some unknown
sort of.
reason, he just appears.
Yeah.
He's like a hippie.
Although he's good.
yeah,
I gotta say.
he performs well.
He's the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, he plays a sort of deadbeat who's also a Christian. Sort of strange,
Yeah.
right? Like, anyway, they mission to sort of like stop to like break up the comet failed. So now the comet's just gonna kill everyone. But the title of the film comes because the comet eventually becomes visible in the sky, and the president and her followers are like, don't look up because they're in denial about the comet. Whereas other people are like,
they still think it's going to be fine, right?
because that's before the mission fails. But
the mission's still going to work. So what happens is this like very heavy-handed, metaphor for the current situation, or like the COVID situation, kind of, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
everybody like the don't look up hats that the president is selling to her followers. They're all red with white text, like the Make America Great Again.
yeah.
Right. And so it's like, stay ignorant versus look up, because what happens is Leo sees the comet.
And he says, stop,
Right.
everyone, there it is. I've been trying to warn you.
And,
Look, we can.
and people who are reasonable and good citizens who haven't really acted yet, now that they can physically see.
Now that they can trust what their eyes
Right.
can show them. They
And
don't
they
have
had
to.
like this whole, I guess like Ariana Grande only agreed to do the movie.
There's just
to be
this
able to- a
interminable
full song
interminable concert scene, which is
Yes.
just like, why is this
where
in?
she performs one of the stupidest lyrical efforts in the history of music.
It's just
About it's
terrible.
time to believe scientists and all this.
Yeah,
shit.
it's just this
It's like
most lib-pilled horror show imaginable.
Right. So like, is this is like a COVID?
Science is my religion.
too?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, clearly that's the other thing is like, what is this movie about? So obviously, just to wrap up the plot summary, they fail. The Earth is destroyed. Everyone dies except the president and her closest advisors, though not Jonah Hill. He's left behind.
Yes.
And the tech, they fly off in hypersleep to a new planet, and they're
Right. So like this is part of the other like weird mixing of all of these possible takes on the genre, right? Is that like they don't cover this at all, that this ability exists, until right at the end of the movie, really, right?
yeah.
When it turns out that their technology is actually so sophisticated,
That they can fly
Right.
to an extra another
Right.
solar system.
but all they've come up with to deal with the meteor
Is like this
is to like
drone thing that
a drone attack that just like, and the way it fails is like, oh yeah, the machines are malfunctioning. So what we've come to realize is this guy, who is apparently genius enough to create travel that will get 2,000 rich people off of the planet successfully, can't turn around drones that will actually function. There's no drama in the sequence, right? It's not like Armageddon.
No,
right?
no,
Where they're
no.
like,
And
there's a
it's
ticking
basically
clock.
Jonah Hill is like managing it, and as it becomes
Right.
clear that it won't work, everyone just ditches,
Right.
like
But the only thing that
including the
happens in
president.
that sequence is that the drones just keep, oh, we're down a couple. Don't worry. Oh, a couple more didn't work. Oh, too many worked. And or too many didn't work. And that's the end of it.
Yeah,
Right. So like
yeah.
they didn't bother writing
Right, there's no
anything
tension of
remotely.
like we
There's
see
no
the
tension.
drone like digging
Right.
in, and then
But
the
then
drill
after this
breaks
lack
or
of
something.
tension,
Yeah.
they magically have the ability to escape the world, just apparently, I guess, so they can do like a joke at the end
Yeah.
in the credits.
Well,
Explain what happens
there's
at
a
the
mid-credit scene of them arriving on this new planet, and they come out of their
yes.
sleep pods, and there are these weird bird-like ostrich things, and Meryl Streep, President Streep, goes up to pet one, and is just
Right.
immediately eaten. And the tech billionaire's like, maybe don't touch them, and then that's it.
And of course, it's like a great example of how, like, you know, again, you go back to like the politics of these people who made this movie, and then you get into the way that they're like ending it. What's interesting, of course, is that like while they do make the decision to have everybody die, which I guess is
Bold.
trying to make a point, right? They still have to be like,
Well, the very rich
the rich,
will
the rich
escape.
well, and get it in the end, so don't worry.
They'll
right?
escape
But
to
then-
hell, where they'll be
but
killed
then,
by a
like,
giant
there's
ostrich.
this heartwarming like the end of like a Full House episode almost, where DiCaprio has reunited with his
With
wife,
his family, and they all
who
died together.
forgives him, I guess, because the scale of
because the world is
disaster.
ending.
Yeah, so like there's no tension there. He just is like, I'm so sorry. She's in fact like, I know.
Timothy
that you are.
Chalamet leads them in prayer and
Yeah,
having
and
like
they
a
all
Thanksgiving
start talking about like genuine human memories
and how they like tried really hard to stop the comet, but like the evil
feel good about trying ultimately. And then like, you know, to say nothing of like failing multiple generations to come, but also like he sort of poignantly turns off the news, right? So
Wow.
they can break bread one last time. And although they're
limiting their screen time heroically.
right, that like that in fact is one of the messages of the movie, sort of ludicrously at this point, considering who these people are and what they just made us watch for 110 minutes, right? Is that like they
140 minutes.
140 minutes, right? That despite all of this, it's like the thing that we can take heart in is that as sort of like irreversible calamities befall us, we'll actually like rediscover that humanity, where the loss of that humanity is part of why we are getting fucking destroyed by a meteor.
Yeah.
But at the last, like, rest easy, because like when you know are living in a climate hellscape and your children and your parents are, you know, dying of starvation or lack of water.
Lack of water. Yeah.
Right. So like you'll all sit around and realize what really actually mattered all along.
That's right. As we starve
like,
to death, we'll really come to appreciate
totally irredeemable
the little things.
piece of art.
And then, do you know there's a post-credit scene where we learn that Jonah Hill has survived. He's the last person on Earth.
Yes. Thank God.
Great. All right. So.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's like
terrible movie.
The last thing to really talk about is that, and you had mentioned when we were preparing for the episode, kind of this notion of, is it actually even an analogy for climate? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple problems with it on that ground. One is the spectacle, right?
Yep.
There's this book by Guy Debord called The Society of the Spectacle, right? Which is a landmark piece of French theory, sort of media criticism.
I'm familiar with that.
Oh, you are? Really interesting. Yeah. I wasn't going to ask. I'm trying to vary up my my routine of interrogate. It's just a tick from teaching. You know, it's like, do you guys know about this guy, John Keats? He's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I hear he's pretty cool. Do you guys hear that?
And all your students hang their head in shame that they just know so much less than you, and then you have this power position over everybody.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about. Totally. No, because usually there are a couple students who are like, "Yeah, wasn't he the?" And I said, "That's very good, Johnny.
Sure.
Tell us more." What?
I'll get there. I'll ace the midterms.
No. But Society of the Spectacle makes the point that, like, you know, these spectacular events are really kind of like magnetize attention in a way that distracts us from essentially everything else that's kind of happening, right?
Right.
And that the event of a comet hitting the Earth, right? In the class I teach on climate change and literature, I often come back to the distinction between climate change and a disastrous event like September 11th, right? Where September 11th, you forever have that image of the plane, crashing into it's just like an indelible spectacle. You look at that and you're like, wow, I'm never going to see that again.
Right. You can see it.
I had a dream. I had a dream last night that was clearly inspired by that image. It was like a building was blowing up in New York in my dream. And I thought, I wonder where that came from. No, I don't. It came from 9/11. And wasn't there, who was it? Famous composer who said of September 11th was like the greatest act of... It was the greatest artwork of like all time, right? Who was that? Oh, it was someone very famous. I can't believe that I'll add a note.
We'll put it in the comments.
I'll put a note at the end of the episode on who it was. But this is a spectacular event. The difference is that climate change is not a spectacular. Climate change has punctuations that are spectacular. Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, wildfires in California, but it's an accumulative disaster. It's a disaster that unfolds gradually over time, and because it lacks that spectacular character, it's much harder to convince people that it needs to be dealt with immediately. Where it's like 9/11 happens, it's like, well, you're all taking your shoes off when you get on a plane. It's like, all right, we are. Just like, oh yeah, we have the Patriot Act. You no longer have any privacy. Cool. Oh, okay. Right? Like, oh, we're going to war with Iraq. Did they have anything? It doesn't matter. We're going to, okay. Right? It's just like, as soon as...
Yeah, and I guess the way that they try to compensate for this is they have it so that the meteor's coming in 6 months.
Right. And so there is a slow moving aspect of it.
But it's not even close. It's not the same thing. It doesn't do what they want it to.
No, because we don't have that kind of definitive timetable. It's not like there's going to be a certain day we get to where it's like climate change has won or climate change has been defeated, right? It's not that kind of a process. There's not going to be any like VE day for climate change, right? Like it's not a war, but we think about these things always in terms of war, right? Oh, there's a drug crisis. Well, we're declared a war on drugs. Oh, terrorism. I have a war on right? It's like we can't have a war on climate change because it lacks that spectacular character. So I think it really fails as a metaphor in this regard. Also, like the people's reaction to the fact that there is a comet coming to destroy the Earth feels so ridiculous in this movie. Right. Like there is no panic until it's literally like visible in the sky. Right. And
there's no panic, and they clearly want to avoid like a hyper-realist reading by trying to make it a send-up, but because it doesn't work, it's like it's just insane.
It just feels going around so hollow, right?
Right. There's absolutely no like even like apocalypse movies, there's always like that like workaday family story that you hear as they like come to grips with what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Like a broken family,
Exactly.
And they try to do something like that with Leo's, but it just doesn't add up. It's given no attention. You don't get a sense of how his family are genuinely like reacting to a looming meteor.
No. And there are a couple scenes when like Kate is in a bar talking with one of the other scientists after she's been black bagged. I think this is before. And they're like, wait, you're talking about the comet. Like, tell us what's real. And it's like, well, they've been on TV trying to do that for months. And then in person, she's like, we're all going to die. Like, they're not going to blow up the comet because they want to get rich off the minerals. And that starts like a minor localized riot in that bar, which is like quickly brought under control. And she's black bagged again and like taken away. And it's like, you mean this isn't spreading? Like, there would be pandemonium in the streets. I mean, look, having lived
Well, I mean, thank God they didn't do that, because then it probably would have been a 3 hour and 20-minute movie.
True. I mean, having lived through COVID is somewhat similar. The sense of doom hanging over everything. Ultimately, not really comparable, obviously. But I remember I had friends who were advising me to leave the city because there was soon going to be like a sort of Mad Maxian level of takeover. And I guess that one of the things Sirota said in an interview with The Hill, I think it was around the time the movie came out, is that their big goal in this was to make a dystopian sci-fi movie about climate change that was not, to make a movie about climate change that was not a Mad Max-esque dystopian sci-fi film. Right. And they've succeeded. I mean, it is nowhere near as good as any of the Mad Max movies.
You fucking nailed it, man. They absolutely nailed it.
Mission accomplished.
Right. It's like it's a dystopian movie without a dystopia, and it's
it has a dystopia, but the dystopia is just already in place. Like the
and there's no real weight to it. Like you said, like but people don't react. Like people, it's like there's no like substance to the dystopia that they've created, which like I think that in some sense, when you see the self-satisfaction in the movie that they like think was
like the big
purposeful maybe, but it's just totally like ridiculous to sit through because you're not learning anything, right?
No.
Like you're having all of the most base preconceived notions about the government and money and tech
and media
and science. Just like this is why it's so perfectly lid-pilled, right? It's why like your parents will tell you that it's
so smart
important,
because it already just tells them what they already know. Right?
Yeah,
it just reaffirms they're already. I mean, like the image of her with Steven Seagal, right? There's like there's this photo of her and Seagal,
the president,
which we're to understand is like a sign of how like vapid and dumb and like and like she's Trump basically, right? Like like here's her with some random celeb, right?
Scott Baio.
Exactly. And then we see that as the world is blowing up, like there are objects flying off into space, and one of the objects we catch glimpse of is that image of her and Seagal. It's like, hey, remember that little callback for you, for those of you who are paying attention.
Right. While casting your climate dystopian satire, just full of all of the most famous people in the world.
Right. It's like what Steven Seagal's not actually in this movie, but Meryl Streep is. And that's you see that guy
Ariana Grande.
That is Leo. That's Leo over there.
Ever heard of Jennifer Lawrence?
Yeah.
You guys should take this really seriously. They're all in it. But
these are like real celebs, not like Steven Seagal, a fake celeb. It's like, what is...
One presumes everyone in the movie really cares. I know Leo legitimately does a lot of work around the environment and climate change.
Well, that's good. God bless him.
For his next project, he should try making a good movie about it.
Well, this movie is also the inauguration of his I Only Play Unspeakable Idiots turn.
Yeah. Turn.
His character is a scientist, but is unbelievably dumb. And this is only topped by his character in Killers of the Flower Moon, who's like the dumbest person this side of Tommy Tuberville or whatever. Sitting U.S. Senator, one of the dumbest.
It takes him even longer to realize he's getting played in that movie.
Oh, God, yeah. So I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about this. This is just my last note was just a terrible film. I hated every minute of it. Lol.
Yeah, I think that sums up how I feel precisely.
It is mysterious that people with good politics can make bad art, but people with bad politics can also make good art. So maybe we shouldn't be so surprised by it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's end it there. What are we talking about next week, Michael?
I can't remember. What did we choose?
It's a scene dividing between us. We're talking about the Denis Villeneuve's newly released film Dune Part 2, and we'll talk about Part 1 as well.
We'll talk about Part 1. I saw Part 1 on Friday and Part 2 yesterday.
So you've had a Dune-pilled weekend.
Unfortunately, I did.
Yeah, so Michael hates Dune. I have more positive feelings about it, but also mixed feelings. And I think it'll be good, though. I think if nothing else, it's a lot better than this, right? I mean,
oh my God. Yes.
So
I will say that for Dune, Unequivocally, it is much better than Don't Look Up.
And it has Timothy Chalamet once again, and
yes, back-to-back Chalamet,
and back to our roots with our first ep was on Arrival. We're already back to Villeneuve. Can it be long?
Well, he's everywhere.
He's inescapable. We'll eventually do his Blade Runner movie too, I'm sure.
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's also pretty good. All right, so remember to like and subscribe. I would say like, but where do you like? Rate and subscribe to the pod.
Yeah, follow us.
Follow us
on Instagram at the End of the World WMS.
Yeah, we post
throw any ratings and stuff you can on the sites. Really,
we post little video clips of our Zoom talks up on the Instagram that are just sort of little highlights.
And you can also DM the podcast Instagram if you have any
suggestions,
information, vetted or otherwise, about Kate Middleton's whereabouts.
Oh yeah, please. We want to get to the bottom of this before we find ourselves. We've just transitioned into being a fully royal pod.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
All right. Well, I look forward to talking about Dune next week, and until then. This is the end of the world. This is the end of
the world with Michael. Oh, no, wait. Sorry. You go.
We can't not screw this up. This is the end of the world with Michael and Stu.
I am Michael.
And I am, in fact, Stu. And we will see you soon. Okay. It was, of course, scene-dividing composer Karlheinz Stockhausen who made the comments about 9/11 as a great work of art. How could I have forgotten that? The world may never know. All right, see you guys next week.